Welcome to Metaphysical Soul Speak. I'm your host, Elena Fox Starks. Hey guys, I hope you're doing well today or tonight, whenever and wherever you are, when you're listening to this recording. I am better today, thank you God. I slept probably all told close to 11 or 12 hours. When I woke up like 5 hours into it, went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror, and my aura was no longer gray. It was kind of a moss green, kind of a sickly green. You know, in the emojis, the little vomiting face, that was the color of my aura. And I just kept asking, should I go to the doctor? And the answer was no, just go back to sleep. And I was told that my mind would just dream whatever and it won't mean anything at all. None of my dreams will mean anything, but my soul will be free to go and fix whatever the hell is wrong with me. And when I finally did wake up, I was the same as yesterday, but better, like maybe 25% better. Just still with the achiness throughout my whole body, the pain, feeling really nauseated, uncoordinated, dizzy. I mean, the whole thing. I swear I was poisoned. I really believe I was poisoned. But now I'm believing it wasn't radiator fluid, so at least it wasn't something that was completely sinister. I still don't know what it is. I mean, it would be weird if it was, at this point, like pesticides, because usually there aren't any in the food here. Sometimes when, when you buy import stuff, imported from the United States, usually does have pesticides, but Ecuador in general, they don't use pesticides. I think that sometimes they do, but it's illegal. They're not supposed to. And I have a feeling I might have ingested something like that, but I don't know, man. I don't even know. I am better though, thank God. A couple of you wrote me and asked if I was better today, and yeah, I'm better. Thank God. It was really hairy yesterday, like really, really bad. Just my gut was hurting like it was rat poison. The only way I know what that is because usually that's how they make lysergic acid, and that's how they adhere it, I think, to the paper. Is they soak the paper in rat poison somehow, and then they put the acid, somehow it keeps it from flying away. I don't know. I don't know how they do it, but I know that that when you're coming down from an acid trip, usually you're like clutching your stomach pretty hard because it hurts like so bad, and it's the rat poison. Sounds so safe, right? Okay, it's not safe, and if you're scared, don't ever take it. But anyways, that's how I know. And I was like, I don't know, maybe it was something like that. I still, right now, I don't know what happened, but I know that I am getting better. And I asked through muscle testing, am I going to be 100% okay without having to go to the doctor or the hospital? And the answer was yes. And obviously, if I had gotten a lot worse today, I would have been in the hospital this morning. But I don't know. I hate doctors. I hate hospitals. I hate going. I don't really hate the doctors themselves. I have a great admiration for them, but I just hate going to the doctor. I really do. You know, usually they don't do what you ask. They don't do what you want. And they send you home with like 0 answers anyway, or with like triple the medication that you need. You know, one way or the other. You know, and all I would have wanted was a blood workup just to make sure I'm okay. But I don't know, it's just weird. I really still feel like it was in the food. I keep asking muscle testing, and I keep getting, yeah, they did something, they sabotaged me, which is weird. I mean, why would they even do that? They would ruin their own business, right? You know, just because I complained or because I asked questions. And most of the time I wasn't even complaining. I was just asking questions. Hey, what kind of salt do you use? You know, but for people that say they're nutritionists and then they served me beets for every meal for like 3 days in a row, and then I started having heart palpitations, it's like, you know, then I had to look into it. And beets, you guys don't eat beets every day. It will give you heart palpitations. It can give you a heart attack because there's so much potassium in beets, that more than in greens. And they're kind of a dangerous vegetable to eat. It's just like, if you eat it, mix it with other vegetables, and don't eat it that often. You know, when I had cancer, I had cancerous tumors on my skin 3 years ago, and I had half a beet, a carrot, 2 cups of water, a tablespoon of maca powder to balance my hormones, and a tablespoon of noni powder, which is excellent. Noni powder, it tastes good. Well, when you're mixing in this mix, you do. And then a whole orange. I put a whole orange or a slice of pineapple. I did pineapple more because it was easily available in Peru, and for like $1. It's super cheap. It's cheaper here. It's like 75 cents to $1 here. But you can use an orange, and you blend all this up, and you take it every day for 3 weeks, or however long it takes until you no longer have cancer. And it does cure cancer. It's been scientifically proven and published in journals to cure cancer. It was published right after I cured my cancer, like literally a week after I was done. And I was like, no way. That is really trippy, because my boyfriend in Peru gave me the recipe. He said, this is something that, you know, my people are from the jungle, my dad's family, and we've known the cure for cancer for forever. So this is just it. I'm like, cool. So I did the cure for cancer, and I literally cured my cancer, and I didn't even go to the doctor then. My oldest kid was like, look, if you go to the doctor and they say, yes, this is definitely cancer, even though you looked at 10 out of the 10 signs and you have 10 of the signs, or 12 out of the 12 signs, you know, whatever the signs were, you know, he was like, dude, you have 100% of the signs. You know what you've got. You even looked up pictures of what you got, and it's exactly the same as what all the people with cancer had. But if you go to the doctor and you get the diagnosis, the problem is it puts something in your subconscious mind, and then it just connects you to your fear. And he says, go ahead and do the cure. See what happens. If you're not cured in like 2 or 3 weeks, then go to the doctor. You know. So that's exactly what I did. And 3 weeks later, all the tumors were gone, and I felt great. Completely 100% great. So I kind of learned from that experience that, you know what, I mean, A, it's easier to cure cancer than the common cold through diet. And B, I don't really need to see a doctor for most things. If I have a broken bone again, oh, hell yeah, sew me up. You know, set the bone, sew me up, whatever it takes. But I don't really, you know, it's not that I don't place a lot of faith in it. I just feel like I have more faith in myself. I know my own body. I know myself better than a stranger who happens to have a degree, you know. But there's some things, you know, like I need to go get some testing just to make sure my hormone levels are fine and figure out what's going on. In a couple different ways. And I need some orthotic inserts for my feet, because since I got my surgery, I have problems walking for long distances or standing for long periods of time without my back being thrown off, which throws off my whole skeletal system. And, you know, and if you guys don't know what orthotics are, you know what, honestly, go get some orthotics. Go look into this. They're literally like $40 to $80 to buy a set of orthotics. It's not just for old people or people with muscle diseases or something. It's literally something that they're inserts you put in your shoes, and they tailor make it, they custom make it to your feet while you wait. I mean, it takes like 20, 30 minutes, and they have these things and they sand them down with the machines. And these things are either made from cork or they're made from plastic. And you just put them in your shoes using Velcro. And you could even Velcro them onto sandals, even flip-flops. You just put Velcro on all your shoes, and then you put the other Velcro on the bottom of your orthotics. And what it does is it makes your feet even on the bottom, and it aligns your spine in a way that makes everything, like from your ankles, your knees, your hips, all the way up to your neck, everything is aligned perfectly. And it takes away all the stress and fatigue of your body. And as it does that, it ends up takes all the stress and the pressure off, and all your muscles will start to relax in time. You won't be fatigued standing or walking anymore. You end up having your skeletal system in place better. Like you don't get as many subluxations. You don't need to visit the chiropractor or the masseuse as often. So I highly recommend orthotics for literally every man, woman, and child as well. It's something that can, prevent a lot of health issues. It's weird. It's kind of like when you floss your teeth. That can prevent a lot of health issues, so... Orthotics, it's like one of those things that people, they see it and they go, oh, that must be for old people or people with like diabetes or something. I don't know, right? Most people don't know what it is, and I didn't know what it was for years. And I used to work in the home and garden fair circuit in Washington, Oregon, and California. And as I was on the fair circuit, you get to know people. You get to see people, the same people over and over and over again, because they're all on the same home and garden fair circuit. It's kind of crazy. It's one of those things where you're just like, dang, this is like weird. We're like these traveling gypsy people, almost in caravans, and every weekend we're in a different city. And like, we'd be like, hey, you going to go to Modesto next week? Yeah, me too. Cool. Are you going to be in Kalamazoo next week? All right, sure, me too. It's one of those weird subcultures that you don't think of. Like, if you go to your local home and garden fair, you don't realize that all the people in that fair with all of those booths probably know each other. They probably have known each other for years, and they probably go city to city to city to city, like gypsies. Selling whatever it is that they saw. And I ended up becoming pretty good friends with a lot of people in this way, because you see them again and again. And anyway, one of my girlfriends, this is what she did for a living, was orthotics. And she had also started a bikini company for women with really big boobs. And she said because bikinis don't cover anything. And so she had literally a catalog called Busty Babes. It was like Busty Babes bikinis. So she would, like, anytime she ran into women with big boobs, she would hand them her bikini catalog. But mostly she just did these orthotic inserts. And it was funny that she did home and garden fairs, but she said, it doesn't matter what fair I do, because everywhere there are people that have aching feet, aching bones. The spine is out of place. They're lopsided because sometimes one leg might be a little bit shorter than the other, and that will cause your spine to misalign and subluxations, and that can cause anything from digestive to lung issues to sinus issues. I mean, anything that goes wrong in your body, usually it's because those organs or whatever aren't innervated correctly, because your spine is out of place. Like, totally weird, right? So, like, for example, even Dr. Berg says if you wake up and your neck is really, really stiff and it hurts like hell, and obviously if it's not like a caffeine thing like I get, a lot of times it's because you've eaten peanuts in the past 48 hours, and peanuts clog your gallbladder. And the gallbladder nerve is innervated, or there's a nerve that runs between, it's actually innervated from a lower lumbar spinal nerve, but there's also another nerve that runs straight up to the right hand side of the neck. So mostly if you have a right hand side like headache, or your right hand side of your neck hurts, it might be because you ate peanuts and your gallbladder is clogged up. And it sounds bizarre, but if you massage your gallbladder, which is just below your right hand side lungs, you just kind of put your fingers in there and you start just massaging really deep. Within a few minutes, your neck is going to loosen up and you're not going to have a headache anymore. You're not going to feel stressed out and you won't have any pain in your neck. And also, you've helped your gallbladder digest the peanuts. Totally weird, right? So anyway, I wanted to mention orthotics today because of that, like all the bizarre issues that can come up just because your spine is out of place. And most people, unless you've seen a chiropractor, you're not going to understand what is going on, you know. But sometimes, like, I know for me, if the ribs, or not the ribs, but the vertebrae that's in the very dead center of my back, in the very middle, I know when that's out of place, I have asthma attacks. And if I put it back into place, then I can breathe fine again. And I know that when I'm having blurred vision, it's probably the very first vertebrae that's attached to my skull. It's like the first one right below the skull. And it's kind of a semi-fixed vertebrae, but you could still like massage that, the really thick muscle at the very back of your head where your head and neck meet, and get that back into place. And when you get that back into place, usually you might get dizzy for about 5 or 6 seconds, and then all of a sudden your vision comes back into place and you don't have blurred vision anymore. And that's if it's caused from that. Otherwise, if you have blurry vision, you don't have enough vitamins and minerals from the plants that you're eating, like your phytonutrients. And so anyway, I've been my whole life interested in health related stuff, health food stuff, vitamins, minerals, all this. My Uncle Jerry, God bless him, God rest his soul, he bought me the magazine called Prevention when I was like 10 years old. I mean, talk about one of the most bizarre gifts to give a 10-year-old child. I mean, I'm not a normal person and I never have been, but with my relatives giving me weird ass shit all the time, like for real, they just made me a million times weirder. My grandma bought me, when I was 10 years old, a subscription to Reader's Digest. Which, I mean, I was just like, what the hell? Like all the older people in my life when I was really little would see that I was just bored out of my mind when I went to visit them in their homes. So I didn't know what else to do but sit and read their magazines. So they thought that I would enjoy having subscriptions to these exact magazines in my home. You know, never mind that I'm 10 years old. I mean, God, give me Teen Beat. I wanted to look at Ralph Macchio and Scott Baio, damn it. I wanted to ogle the hot, sexy teenage boys. But no, they bought me the old people magazines, which is hysterical. But of course I read them because I'm curious about everything in the world. And, you know, in Reader's Digest, I was just like, oh my God, it's like the most conservative magazine in like ever. So I swear that, you know, Teddy Roosevelt probably blushed while reading this, if it even existed back then. I mean, it was just like so freaking conservative, but but I read it, and I read Prevention, and I like literally read it cover to cover because my uncle would freaking call me and ask me about that article on vitamin A. Wasn't that interesting? Oh my God. He like quizzed me. This was like my secondary school. It was my secondary school. And I think the problem, like the biggest reason was, okay, A, I had asthma. And the second thing was he said, well, he didn't say it, but he was very judgmental of my parents for having been super, super fat, right? My dad was fat-ish. He had a big tummy on him. And then he found out he had diabetes, and he started the right diet, and he lost all the weight, and he never really put it back on. I think when he died, he was 65. He had a little bit of a tummy again, but it wasn't all that bad. He was still kind of, I mean, he died of he was actually healthy, but then what happened was he had drank water, and the water treatment plant in Grand Forks, North Dakota, something happened with it, and someone turned one valve one day and let the bacteria-ridden water into the drinking supply, and 10 people died of this mysterious heart bacteria that affects the heart, basically. And my dad was one of those people. And so it was like really crazy out of nowhere, super tragic. He was in a nursing home for like months, not knowing what the hell was happening. When they caught it, it was really too late. It had already weakened his heart so much, and he ended up dying from that on his 65th birthday, actually. But anyway, my uncle had been, not my stepdad, my uncle had been very concerned that I was going to end up like them, even though I wasn't related to them. I didn't have the same genetic makeup as my adopted father and my stepmother. But he was afraid I was going to pick up bad eating habits. So he was always asking me about, how to prevent different things, and, how to eat more protein and vegetables and carbs. And he was always trying to help me eat good oils and stay away from the bad oils. And every now and again, I'd get like bottles of vitamins in the mail. And my mom would send me bottles of vitamins in the mail. And then my other friend of the family, she called herself our grandma, and she would just send the family like massive crates of oranges from Florida. Just to make sure we have vitamin C, sunshine from the Sunshine State, So I don't know. I pretty much grew up around a lot of old thinking people and old minded people, but also health conscious people. They were all terrified I was going to end up like my stepmom and my father, who were both very, very overweight. And, I think on my stepmother's part, it was poor eating habits, but also genetics, and also maybe like a low self-esteem type of thing, possibly. I don't know. But sometimes she would eat healthy and sometimes she wouldn't. And I think it was stress related. But she ended up getting her stomach stable. And when she died, she was a size 10. I mean, she had actually done it. She finally got her body the way she wanted it, and everything was great. When she finally died, she had it all, I mean, my dad had died, she didn't have it all, but she finally had gotten everything together. So that was kind of cool for her. But, and so I've been often, and my whole life, been interested in health related things because of these insane influences in my life. So anytime I meet up with anyone who does anything that's unique or different health wise or nutrition wise or whatever, I always want to know. I'm always so interested in it. Like, if you go back to my pain relief episode way back, like maybe it was like February or March, I did one on pain relief. And I tell you guys how to take 2 tennis balls and you just tape them together with duct tape. And that's literally my chiropractor. I mean, I put this underneath my spine and I move it up every couple minutes. It takes about half hour, and it releases and relaxes all the muscles in my spine, and then I stretch and all my bones go back into place. So it's kind of like my do-it-yourself chiropractor, and I've used this for years, and it's one of those things that's super helpful, to me and to everybody who's tried it. My oldest was having problems with his spine curving while he was growing, and his doctor said, this is what you do. You just put this under your spine every day and just move it up along your spine. And it's going to hurt at first, but after a while, it will release all the muscles. and you're going to go back into place. And after he did this for a couple of weeks, his spine was perfectly straight. You know, and he had like a doctor before that, it was like 85 years old, who said, you know, if you don't wear a back brace and put him in this really thick, like inch thick plastic brace, if you don't wear this brace every day for the next like 6 years of your life, you're going to have a curved back forever. And as soon as my husband died, I just said, you know, screw that back brace. We're going to find you a different way, because this is insanity. It was like putting her, you know, well, he's a he now, but back then she was a she, putting her in a prison. And I was like, no way. I don't agree with this. You're too hot. This is making you uncomfortable. It's emotionally devastating you. Screw this crap. We're going to find a different way. And we did. And the tennis balls was the solution. How crazy is that? And within like 3 weeks, you know, his spine was better. And now that he's on testosterone and becoming a man and he feels more confident, his back has straightened up from the hormones. It's weird. He's like, my feet have grown, I've gotten taller, and my back is straight now. How weird is that? I'm like, how amazing. I'm so grateful to know that, you know? So anyway, so here's some of my helpful, you know, hints and tidbits. I've talked about the cancer cure before, and obviously the tennis ball cure. But I'm bringing it up again because I now have had over 20,000 listens to my show. I have 94 people that are listening regularly. Just about a week and a half ago, I only had about 88 or 89 people listening regularly. So I've got another new 5 regular listeners. And also, I just got on the iTunes charts for, oh my God, the United Arab Emirates. So, marhaba, salam alaikum to my sisters and brothers in the United Arab Emirates. I was very impressed by that. I think it's very cool that you guys are listening to my show. In fact, I think I know who you are, and I think you're my friend Mohammed, and I think you're from Egypt, but you're working in UAE. Am I right? Write me a letter if it's you. I think I know who you are. But I'm on the iTunes chart, so very, very cool. It makes me happy to know that I'm all over the world. I'm being heard all over the world now. It's cool. So that's why I mentioned some of these things again. Every now and again, I'm going to mention things like the cure for cancer, or at least how I cured my own cancer, because there's no law that says you have to die of this slowly and horribly after taking chemo for months, if not years, wasting away in a hospital bed, when perhaps it was just your nutrition that was messing with you all along, right? Same thing with everything, though, with your eyesight. In fact, I just bought a program about a year ago on how to fix your eyesight, because I've been having to wear my cheaters a little bit more, my reading glasses, and I have yet to do it. I kind of started, and then it was kind of complicated, but I'm gonna renew myself to this one now that all the summer fruits are coming out down here. It's summertime, spring right now. It's going into summer soon. Cherry season. Oh my God. I don't think they're 100% keto friendly, but oh, I love cherries so much. The ladies come from the farms and they are wearing their traditional native dress and they're really stylish, kick-ass Panama hats, and they sell cherries on every freaking corner downtown. And I mean the dark, dark maroon red cherries that are just big and juicy and so sugary. Again, not keto friendly, but oh my God, they're so good for you and so healthy and amazing, and way too many carbs possibly. But I'm still looking forward to cherry season. And when cherry season ends, I think I cry a little every year. I've been here 2 years, and in 2 years I've kind of cried about it because I've missed the cherries. But but people like these women that stand on the street corner selling them, they have these massive wheelbarrows, and the wheelbarrows are they have like a blanket in the bottom of the wheelbarrow, and they're like old, like rusted out, like old fashioned style wheelbarrows, and it's like 3 feet above the top of the wheelbarrow, completely covered in cherries. And then when the cherry season is over, then they do that with strawberries. I love this town because of all the fruit that's everywhere. They just sell it on every street corner, massive amounts of fruit. You know, it's kind of a healthy place to be because of all the fruit, you know, like and sometimes they do that with avocados and it's incredible, but they'll give you one to try and then, you know, but it's like $5 for 10 straws. It's like insanely expensive, but if you go to the right person, they'll give you like a really huge bag for $5. But sometimes they try to rip you off if they think you're a tourist because they think they're never going to see you again and you're not going to know any better. And it's just always the same way. I've had some pretty mean old women that tried to sell me like, you know, 4 strawberries for like $1 million. It's horrible. Usually they're not that bad, but I don't know. Okay. And hilarious. I'm on the disclosurenews.it and right now they have an ad that says, see how to cleanse your liver. I'm like, probably I need to know that because of whatever the hell I ate the other day. And I think that's what's hurting my liver. Maybe I have a fatty liver. Maybe that's the problem. I see that. I'm like, okay, there's a sign from God probably. Right next to a thing that says, buy us a coffee. Oh, maybe coffee's the solution. Coffee's always the solution. I don't care if it's not the solution. For me, it's always a solution. All right, so this is really strange. I don't know why suddenly they say this. On disclosurenews.it out of Italy, I don't know what just happened. Did I hop? Did I hop a timeline? It doesn't say Hertz 14, it says CC 14, and under CC 14 it says consciousness currents. Well, that's not scientific. I like it. Consciousness currents, baby. But this is like the opposite of scientific phenomena. Here is the frequency of the Schumann resonance consciousness currents. Oh my God. Did I hop a timeline? Is that really what it's saying right now? Anyway, 1700 report says slight activity limited to a period of 10 hours from 1 to 11. The maximum peak was 14 cc. What the flock? I mean, okay, let's just go to another website in which we know it's still going to say like Hertz frequency. Consciousness currents. Oh my God, we don't need the scientists to be more new agey. All right. We need you just the way you are. Oh my God. Oh, that just blew my mind. Just like that. California today saw 116 hertz frequency at midnight, and by 4 a.m. they were to 111. 111. Yay. We all know that is a master number and probably a sign for some of us. You might want to look it up in your Angel Numbers app. And Hofuf, Saudi Arabia, started off at 146 at midnight and went all the way up to 153 by 4 a.m. And as far as Lithuania is concerned, they started off at 166 hertz frequency at midnight, and they stayed exactly the same at 4 a.m. They only went up to 167 around 1 and then went back down to 166. Now, 166, is it a master number? Maybe. You might want to look it up, possibly. So, let's see here. In Alberta, Canada, they started off at 194 hertz frequency, not consciousness currents, and they went down to 187 by 4 a.m. Hofuf. No, that's not Hofuf. Sorry. Northland, New Zealand, started off at 128 hertz frequency at midnight. By 4 a.m., they were down to 117 hertz frequency. Now, this one is wildly out of control suddenly. Hulului in South Africa started off at 322 hertz frequency at midnight, and by 4 a.m. they were down to 313. Hey, baby, 313, Detroit. That's Lions territory, baby. That is the area code for Detroit, Michigan, 313. My kid and I, we have a thing like when we were in Detroit. It's like a thing that everyone does on our block, and we called it the L block. Well, they called it the L block, and we started calling it the L block because the name of our street begins with an L. The L block, and we used to have block parties, mostly for the children. The neighborhood get together, and we all pitch in $20 and participate so that the kids would have like a good Easter or a good 4th of July party, or we would do, do barbecue. It was like really cool. It was like an actual real community, and I loved Detroit for that. I loved it. But the L block was super cool, and everyone's always talking like, you got to protect the 313, or this is the 313. You know how it is in the Big D, the 313, the place to be. And it was just like so cool. And one of the things we learned is when you leave the house, you leave the kitchen light on, because it looks like you're home and no one's going to come in your house, right? Because, again, Detroit. So every time we leave the house, we always say, remember the 313. And that means turn on the kitchen light before we leave the house so that we know no one will try to come in and everyone thinks we're home and they won't try anything funny or whatever. Always and forever. We've been saying that for years now. Remember the 313. Oh, yeah, right. Thanks. 313, yo. I love it. Anyway, let's see here. On the Ascension Symptom Scale, we are at 96. I'm muscle testing. Are we at 96? Yes. We're at 97? No, we're at 96 on this scale of Ascension Symptoms today. The SAS score. SAS! Symptoms of Ascension Scale. All right. ACIM.org, A Course in Miracles, from the Foundation for Inner Peace. Today is another review, lesson 114. The first part is taken from lesson 97 and is very short and sweet. I am spirit. I am spirit. I am the Son of God. No body can contain my spirit, nor impose on me a limitation that God created not. I am spirit. Now, taken from lesson 98 is, I will accept my part in God's plan for salvation. I will accept my part in God's plan for salvation. What can my function be but to accept the Word of God, who has created me for what I am and will forever be? So basically on the hour you say, I am spirit, and on the half hour you say, I will accept my part in God's plan for salvation. And of course what this means is to get yourself out of you're saving yourself from the insanity of thinking that you're separate and apart and away from everybody else and God. And that your function is anything less than absolute pure grace, joy, love, and forgiveness. Because you are so much more than you give yourself credit for, guaranteed. And there you have it. I was going to try to do a couple readings. We'll see where we're going to go. But tonight we're going to talk about gardening with the fairies. I haven't mentioned this one before, and I was going to do something specifically on the Paralandra garden. I'm going to mention it, but I went to her website and she has all these weirdness and permissions, and you can't email her. You have to send her a physical hard copy letter in order to just simply ask about talking about what's in her books, which is kind of insane. So I'm going to mention her books. I'm going to, pass the information along and tell you the basics of what I did from her books, from memory. I'm not going to read from her books. And I'm not going to give a workshop or anything on Michelle Smallwright's stuff. But it does bear mentioning. I mean, it's worth mentioning because she is an excellent person for this. And I learned some of this stuff from her. In fact, most of the stuff I learned from her, just to be honest. So I'm going to talk to you guys about my experience of gardening with the fairy folk right after this message. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's high time you did. It is the absolute easiest way to make a podcast. First of all, it's absolutely free. Second of all, they have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. You guys have known that I've been doing this for 8 months using the Anchor.fm app right on my cell phone, and I have done it everywhere, right? I have recorded this in my living room, my bedroom, little cafes in Quito, Ecuador, all over Cuenca. It's so absolutely easy to make your podcast, and editing is just a snap. Anchor also will distribute your podcast for you, and it took me about 2.5 months to become syndicated, and now I'm available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more, and so can you. You can make money from your podcast also, and there's no minimum requirement. You get paid from your very first listener. It is everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. So please, if you are interested in making a podcast of your very own, do not hesitate to start with Anchor. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Metaphysical Soul Speak is run on sponsors and listener support. This means listeners like you. If you are so inclined to support my efforts and my little podcast, please visit me at anchor.fm/metaphysical and pledge an amount of your choosing today. Thank you. So my husband that I was married to for like 11 and a half years, we were together 13, get away from him, trying to divorce him. God rest his soul. Anyway, he was raised by people who in their past lives were druids and had very much that magic, not only in their blood because of the Irishness, but also they had this in their souls. They've always been magical folk, okay? So, in fact, I had a dream about his grandmother and his grandfather, and we were all druids together in, I think it was in Ireland, and what is now Ireland anyway. And we were druids, and we were like, at least our band of druidry, we just collected plants, and we would have communication with the fairy folk or the plants themselves. And we found out through our intuition and our telepathy how to pick the plants, at what point, at what time. And one time I had a dream of this past life memory where we were walking and it was like the moon was out. It was a full moon. So we did it according to the moon. We did it according to the season. And we did it according to the hour, and in some cases, the very minute. And we would ask the plant before we picked it, is this a good time to take some of your leaves for this purpose? And we'd have to wait for the answer. And we would ask these plants permission to take from their leaves. And we would never pull a whole plant. We would never try to hurt the plant because we wanted to be able to come back and, get more. So, I mean, we were taking lichens, ferns, mosses, mushrooms that grow on the side of trees, scraping the stuff from underneath the sides of plants, like ferns, that's their seeds, fern seeds grow on the underside of ferns, or the, sometimes there'd be mold that grew on the underside of a fungus of a mushroom, and that might have been good for something. And sometimes you would take dirt from certain areas because the color of the dirt, we knew that would have a magical property for whatever. We probably didn't know that the red dirt was iron or the black dirt had magnetic properties. We just knew that certain things were for certain things. And we used our intuition. It was highly developed. So I had this dream, and it was very crazy. And we went out in the middle of the night when things were glowing, like at certain times of the year, the plants would be glowing at certain, not only times of year, but times of night at, certain hours, and the way that the moonlight would gleam off of them, that would be our light that we provided. It was provided to us so that we could pick our herbs and plants and whatnot. And we had a great deal of knowledge back then that I'm pretty sure most of it was lost, actually. Some of it was still around, passed down through generations and whatnot. But anyway, so it's crazy. So basically, my husband was raised by these people who didn't really realize that they were druids in a past life, I don't think, but they still had that magical quality about them. And they were still interested, very, very interested in spirits and fae folk, and you meaning the fairies, and, or the wee folk, the little people, if you will. And I always had the interest, as I mentioned in the first half, about vitamins and minerals and nutrition and plants and herbs and, like the medicine that people used to take 100 years ago. I even bought that book, Jethro Kloss Back to Eden. And if you have any interest in learning about anything herbal related, I suggest you buy this book and memorize it. Read it cover to cover. I didn't have it memorized, but I would read it like one would read a novel voraciously. Every day I was like writing notebooks. I was like taking notes, and I had to learn really strange words like catarrh, like when's the last time you went to the doctor and said, well, I'm suffering from catarrh, catarrh. Nobody ever even uses these words, right? So I had to memorize what all of these things were, which that's kind of like a common cold or a cough, or, I'm suffering from croup, or croup, CROUP. Croup is kind of the same thing, but usually mostly in babies. So like I learned all these insane words that, so when I watch movies, they're like made about the 1800s, and they mention, well, she's suffering from, I'm like, oh yeah, all right, I know what that is. She has dropsy. Oh, okay. That just means that she's feeling a little bit weak and she's fainting a lot. So like you just learn, and as I've been watching Outlander, there's a lot of these words are coming up, and it's hilarious to me. So it's like, oh yeah, I've always been a weirdness magnet and a weirdo, and I've always, always been really, really, really interested in this stuff. So if you know about these old fashioned words, and you can go back and look at what did people use way back in the day for asthma before inhalers existed, and what did people use for all of these other things, and like St. John's wort was always used for depression. Well, guess what? It has an MAO inhibitor, which is like most of the antidepressants that they give today also have an MAO inhibitor. You're not supposed to eat cheese if you're taking St. John's wort. A lot of people don't know that, and they start having other problems. They're like, wait, well, that's usually what it is. Most doctors don't know that. But I learned a lot of this stuff. And the family of Jethro Kloss, even though this was written in the 1800s, they ended up updating the book again and again. So you could find a brand new edition that kind of has some modern information, like the MAO inhibitor example. So I learned a lot. I learned what do you take if you have an unwanted pregnancy? There's a few herbs, you just mix them in a tea, you drink it, and bada boom, bada bing. And I know that there are herbs in South America that they know well about. They will, you just kind of whisper to some old lady that, you find an old lady among the herbs and you're like, okay, I need this for this. And they go, oh yeah, shh, shh, shh. And they'll be very quiet and they hand you the herbs. It's pretty cool that knowledge, that old world, old style herbal knowledge, it still exists today, right? So my interest was always, always, always about herbal remedies and how you can use plants and things from nature to heal yourself. But my husband had the rest of the story for me. And the rest of the story for me was that all of the plants have nature spirits that help the plants to grow and gives them their energy, and they love the plants. They put their love into the plants, and as they do, they become kind of magical, and if you honor the plant and you love the plant and you work with the spirit of the plant, you're going to get a lot more out of the plant when you use it medicinally or magically or however. Even if you're just going to make yourself a cup of hot mint tea, if you honor the fairy folk that are helping you grow it in your garden, you're going to have a much more magical, much more rich blend of tea than if you just grabbed whatever and harvested it because, So if you have honor for the plants. See, and also I'm part Cherokee Native. That's my tribe. My grandfather grew up on the reservation. And, so I've always had, even though I did not grow up knowing my grandfather, and I did not grow up in Oklahoma or Arkansas, and I did not know much of that. My adopted grandfather also was from Arkansas. And my adopted grandfather was also Cherokee and also grew up on the res. So I missed out on my birth grandfather, but my adopted grandfather, who I think might have actually been a distant cousin, which was pretty cool, he ended up giving me kind of this love and respect for nature, and he always had his garden and he had birds that he fed. He put, my grandfather was smart as hell. This is what he did. I'm going to tell you this, how he did his garden, how he worked with the nature spirits. And I swear I saw a lot of nature spirits around there when I was really little. I would see stuff out of the corner of my eye all the time. And my grandpa would just kind of keep tight-lipped about it, but he'd kind of smile and nod his head. I'm like, all right, I'm like, I think I just saw a little man. He, But then I didn't know if he was just poo-pooing me, not really believing me, or if the native part of him said, well, yeah, of course, there's spirits everywhere, right? But he never talked about it. He just never talked about it. But I have a feeling he might have known more than he let on. But he always worked with spirits of nature. But the way he did it was intelligently, he wasn't shaking a rattle and dancing in the garden at midnight when the moon was full. I mean, he didn't do anything crazy, like what he would have considered crazy like that, right? He was a Virgo. He had a good head on his shoulders, He was a good man. But he was really intelligent. In one part of the garden where it was on the side of the house where it was really damp and kind of dark, he built up a little... it was 4 or 5 inches tall. Maybe it was a 2x4s he used, and he put it on the ground, and he put like a wire fence, a really almost like a screen, and then he filled that up with the thickest, richest, blackest soil he could find that I think he went and he bought like at a gardening center. And I think he even put like possibly put chicken manure or something in it. But then he put a bunch of newspapers, and on top of the newspapers he put coffee, and on top of that he put a giant board, and he put it down with rocks. And in that dirt he mulched it, and in that dirt he put earthworms, the red earthworms, and they grew really, really, really fat, really big, juicy earthworms. He would take those earthworms and he grew himself and he fed himself, and he would go out and catch fish. So he ate fish 2 or 3 times a week. He grew up poor in Arkansas on the res, and this is what his way was. This is how he ate most of the time. He also did construction and he did roofing, and he was always very, very, very much working and making tons of money. He made a lot of money in LA and Orange County. And he also had a garden though. And he also he was raised to grow his own garden. And so he had a little plot, a little garden, and above the garden on the telephone pole and against the fence, he put out this massive platform. It was like 6 feet by 6 feet, right? This massive platform. And he would put 3 or 4 inches of bird seed in that platform. He would go get massive bags, pour it all out at once. And every week he would put the bird seed out. And when the birds went above the garden, went above the garden, if you know what I mean. Their bird manure would go into the garden, and after the birds were done eating, he would then water the garden so that all of that nitrogen got into the soil, and all of his vegetables were very, very healthy, and his garden grew incredible. He had the best. I mean, he had enormous tomatoes, and everything was organic. He never sprayed with pesticides. Everything was organic, and he would go out, and I'd have to hold the bucket while he pulled off every individual tomato worm off the tomato plants. And he'd go throw them away. And then he'd go get the red earthworms, and he'd put those in the garden. And I mean, he was intelligent, and he always worked with the nature spirits. And he would just sit out in the yard every day and look at his garden for hours. And now looking back, I think he might have been working with the nature spirits. Sometimes I would hear him talking to his garden. And those are the times I thought, Grandpa's had too much beer. He's drunk again. I think I probably need to not be here, or at least hide behind this planter where he can't see me. But now looking back, I think he was talking to the nature spirits. So from a very early age, I had this love of nature and the love of gardening and love of birds. And one time he caught a rabbit. A rabbit came into our yard because it saw the garden, it saw the lettuce and the cabbage. And my grandpa said to my grandma, well, we have a rabbit now. A rabbit's come. I gotta go get some feed for it. It was like the neighbor's rabbit. The rabbit came hopping underneath the fence, right? And he put a rock in front of the hole and he goes, we have a rabbit now. And my grandma says, oh, don't you dare. I don't want any animals in this house. My grandma was terrified of animals. She's the opposite. She was a homebody, never wanted to go outside or hang out. If she hung out in the patio and she saw bugs, she'd freak out and go back in the house. She couldn't handle it. And my grandpa was opposite. And so she says, oh, don't you dare, Eddie, don't you dare go out and get that a bag of feed. And I swear to God, if you get anything to feed that rabbit with, just get a little tiny box. I don't want you coming home with a 50-pound bag. So my grandpa and I went out and bought a 50-pound bag of rabbit food. And then 3 or 4 days later, the neighbors figured it out. They came knocking on the door. And my grandpa said, well, okay. And he poured some of the feed into a Tupperware container and put it in the cabinet and said, if your rabbit comes around again, I'm going to feed it, but to make sure it's okay. But here's a 50-pound bag of feed I bought the rabbit. You know, and they were like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. Like, you're like the sweetest person. And he's like, yeah, I know. And he rescued a Siamese kitten from inside of one of our bushes in the front yard. And that was his cat forever, Goofball. And Goofball would come around and always leave a mouse at our doorstep as an offering for the human gods that protected him. And my grandpa had a way with animals. It was sweet, you know. And the same thing, my grandma's like, oh, we're not keeping it, Eddie. We're not keeping it. We're going to find who the cat belongs to. We're going to give it back. And my grandpa says, hop in the truck. I'm all right. We went out and came back home, a 50-pound bag of cat food. So I got my love of nature, my love of gardening and all that from my grandpa Eddie. I called him my pappy because he's from Arkansas, and pappy's kind of an Arkansas term for grandpa, grandpappy. But my dad taught me to call him Grandpa Fox or grandpappy. And he's actually, my Grandpa Fox was related directly to the King of Ireland, Hoiber Shani. And Shani was the English word for, or the Irish word for, or the Gaelic word for fox, right? So there's a famous painting of my great-great-grandpa who was the king of Kilcourcy Castle in Ireland. And this is my Grandpa Fox. It was his direct descendant, but he was more close to the side of himself that was native rather than the Irish side. But I think there was a lot of the magical stuff. The Irish stuff was there. He had a lot of superstitions and things I think were maybe possibly passed down from the King of Ireland, of that little teeny tiny part of Ireland. There was many kings from Ireland back in the day. But anyways, that was my first love. And then when I met my first love of gardening and nature and all that comes from my grandpa. But then when I met my husband, he was like, well, there's fairies that are attached to all the plants. I'm like, whoa, a new level of understanding. Because I didn't know, I knew fairies existed kind of, and I thought I'd seen them a lot my whole life, but I didn't quite put two and two together that they are in charge of the plants. Well, it wasn't until I read the book, Perelandra Garden by Michelle Small-Wright, and her name is spelled like Michelle but with an A, so Machaellele, and then her last name is Small, like Small, normal, small, and then a dash, and then Wright, Wright, like Orville and Wilbur Wright, the Wright brothers. I don't know if she's related or her husband's related or whatever to them, but that's her name. And Perelandra is spelled Perelandria. I mean, no, there's no I. Perelandra. Perelandra. There you go. So Perelandra Garden. And so I got really interested because my husband told me about the Findhorn Garden. And you could go to findhorn.org to check that out. You could also go to Perelandra-ltd.com, I think. It might be org. I think it might be limited. So perelandra-limited.org. Let me look this up again. I just looked it up and then I accidentally... Perelandra. So Perelandra is the name of her garden. I don't know what it means. And she does have a YouTube channel. And she's very... Perelandra, I guess, is the second book in the space trilogy of C.S. Lewis, set on the planet of Perelandra, which is another name for Venus. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? So the Center for Nature Research is perelandra-ltd.com. And anyway, I got very interested in Michelle Small-Wright stuff. This stuff, her information was... She went to the Findhorn Garden and she had learned a lot of stuff from them, but also through her own intuition, she started noticing that certain bits and pieces of land in which battles or wars had been fought or negative stuff, the negativity got down deep into the land. And that was the first time I'd ever heard of that. And she said that she started to be called around the U.S. where battles had taken place, especially in the East Coast, to energetically take away all the negativity. And because things won't grow where a horrible battle had been fought. So she started working with what she calls the nature intelligences, the nature spirits. Now, she doesn't really call them fae or fairy or wee folk or anything. She calls them nature intelligences or spirit intelligences. And she got a lot of her information from the Findhorn Garden, but also a lot more came to her while meditating and working with these nature intelligences themselves. And through her work, I discovered that fairies are the wee folk that dance around the trees, they dance around the plants, they give the energy and the love to the plants. And they're more willing to work with plants that are not directly connected to humans. They will work with the plants that are kind of left on their own in the wild. And if humans are insisting on making rows and rows and rows and rows and doing it their own way, a lot of times the fairy folk will leave unless they're invited to stay. And when she wrote her book, she talked about that, okay, so there's fairies, but there's also, above the fairies, there's the realm of the devas. And every energetic space has a deva, which is like the fairy godmother of all the wee folk, of all the fairies. And she will kind of see to it that they're all protected, loved, and taken care of. So if you have, you might have the flower fairies and the woodland fairies and the tree fairies and the grass fairies, even all the plants, vegetable, fruit, all the fae folk come with. Even when you buy the seeds, they'll come with you. You buy the seeds, you're carrying little fairies with you. Now, if you don't invite them in and you're mean or rude to them, they will leave. And they will hope to God that the seeds will germinate on their own and do everything on their own. But it's not going to have the spirit of it, So if you eat fruit or vegetables in which the person that grows them loves them and takes care of the fae folk as much as the plants, then you're going to find that the food will taste better, will have a higher quality, and it'll have like a spirit to it where have you ever eaten like a peach off of a tree that's just growing randomly somewhere, and the peach tastes so good that it brings tears to your eyes, or an apple so crisp that you're just like, oh my God, this is incredible. And then you go to frickin' grocery store and you buy an apple that was grown on a commercial farm, and the farmer doesn't know anything. They have no connection to the land. They know nothing about the fairy folks. The fairy folks have left. They don't care because the farmers don't care. And the commercial stuff, and you just bite into it, and the apples are mealy or they're weird. They just don't, they look good, but they have no flavor. And they're horrible. And when people use pesticides, a lot of times the fairies will leave. They just don't want anything to do with it. So, but if you have organic food, there's always so much more spirit, so much more life in it. And that's why. It's one of the reasons why. The sunshine and, the correct, fertilizer, the correct minerals for the soil and the correct water. If you use water that has fluoride in it and chlorine in it, and you're using pesticides, chances are you're not going to have very good tasting food. But if you do everything correct and you make sure that the soil is balanced and that there's energetically nothing negative in the deepness of the earth, from what humans have done, if the patterns, aren't there and there's no negative ghost spirits or battlefield energy, you take care of all that and you love the land and tell it what you're going to do, then your food's going to taste better, right? So I got interested in all this, and I set out to have myself a garden. In Magalia, which is just north of Paradise, California. Yes, the town that burned down to the ground. I raised my kids there for 10 years. And we were in that big fire, but not the massive fire. And during that big fire, I remember thinking, oh my God, we are literally in a fire trap. And this was too close for comfort. And after I divorced my husband, I moved to the city. And I said, I am never, ever going to live in this area again because it's so dangerous. There was one lane to go into the town and one lane to get out. And I was like, dude, no, this is too scary and too dangerous. And that there were fairies everywhere, throughout the whole place, except when the mosquito people rolled around and randomly sprayed people's neighborhoods without asking, without warning, just pesticides everywhere, suddenly out of nowhere. All my neighbors got it in their house, in their freaking window, because no one bothered to call or tell anyone. And then finally, you get on a list, then they'll call you the following year. But I employed my fairy folk friends, the Deva of the forest, I asked them to go sabotage the equipment. And they called me and said, we don't know what happened. And they were spooked. They said we set out everything was working fine. We tested it. And an hour later, all the equipment broke down and there's no explanation. And the lady was shaking. Her voice was absolutely shaking. And when she called and told me that, and I'm like, good. The nature spirits don't want you to use your equipment here, and you're never going to be able to. Because after the first year, all of the songbirds left. All the butterflies were gone. No more caterpillars. No more pollination between the trees. My cherry trees stopped producing cherries. All because they wanted to kill off the mosquitoes, which killed off all of the insects, and all the birds left. And the songbirds and a lot of the insects will put out a frequency and an energy that helps the trees and the plants to grow the things that they grow. In fact, there's a website called Sonic Bloom. You go, I think it's like sonicbloom.net. It might be sonic-bloom.net. But if you look up Sonic Bloom and you buy this, there's like a music with a frequency that the plants need to grow. And it's the same frequency as songbirds. And when you do that, you're going to end up with like corn that's like 2 feet long and you don't need pesticides to grow it. It's like enormous. This one family grew a head of cabbage that was like 3 or 4 times bigger than a normal head of cabbage, and it never got moldy, and it stayed fresh in the refrigerator for over 6 months. It took them 6 months to eat 1 head of cabbage. And they just had a normal family garden. They had to give away all the rest of their cabbage because it was just too much. There's no way that they could have eaten it. It was like so big. And they wanted to see, when is it ever going to get mold? And 6 months later, there's still no mold on it. I mean, that's like quite a feat. But this man discovered how to work with nature. And he took seaweed and he made a special formula. And he would play the music, and the pores in each individual leaf on the plant would open up, and he would spray this seaweed formula into the plant. And so he worked with nature, and that increased the yields, and it got to a point where people were growing like massive tomatoes the size of very large grapefruit in Utah in the dead of winter. And people were making a lot of money doing stuff like this because the local stores were like, whoa, we don't have any suppliers for tomatoes in December or February. And here these people had using the Sonic Bloom, right? So he was using nature as well. I don't know if he worked with fairies, but I know that he definitely he figured out some cool things. But Michelle Small-Wright talked about how to connect with the Deva of the garden and ask. And so I did this, and I used her book. She has a lot of books, by the way. MAP, the Co-Creative Consciousness of the Great White Brotherhood. It's the Medical Assistance Program, MAP. And also she has behaving as if the divine and all life matters. And she has another book, The Perelandra Garden, and workbook 1 and 2. So I highly recommend all of her stuff. She's very, very scientific and methodical about working with the fairies. But she actually, when she went to Findhorn Garden in Europe, she was actually able to teach them some things that they did not know. Using her intuition, she discovered some things. And the Findhorn people have been working with fairies to grow food for a long, long time. So all this knowledge I was armed with. And I also bought haunted jewelry that would have fairies attached so I could learn more. I mean, I really, really got into this for a while. And so in my experience, this is going to blow you guys' mind, okay? Even though my garden did not grow, I mean, I went through all the catalogs. I was outside showing the nature spirits, and they picked out everything. And I mean, I spent like $150 on seeds, okay? $18 on asparagus, purple passion asparagus that was supposed to be the highest top quality award-winning asparagus that was also an heirloom. And I bought all heirloom seeds. I bought all stuff that was organic, coming from organic stock, organically grown, nothing commercially grown. Everything was 100%, legit, right? The thing I didn't count on, though, is that, well, a few things. The soil was red clay, and I mixed it with all the other soil. I did everything that the books told me to do, and I mixed it with the soil so that it would be broken up. And Michelle had smelled right, had said, go get hay. So I went and I got hay. And apparently there's a couple different kinds of hay, and one of them has a bunch of hay seeds in it. Wish I would have known that. So I got the one with the seeds not knowing, and so I mixed the hay in with the clay soil to break it up a little bit more. So I did everything right, but it didn't really, nothing really grew. In fact, the more that you water clay soil, the harder it gets, like a clay pot. And the more the sun bakes the soil as if it's a clay vase. So that was, like the bad part of the experience. But the good part of the experience is that, I bought live plants, not just seeds too. In some cases, I bought the live plants, but I asked the nature spirits painstakingly. I went through all of the Michelle Small Wright's information from the Perelandra Garden book, and I went through methodically what kind of a shape, what kind of a size, how many feet by how many feet should this be. And I ended up with what the fairies told me was a male garden and a female garden. The male garden was very small, and it was square, and there was a center to it, a circle in the center, and spiral arms coming out of it in a spiral armed pattern. Even though the garden itself was supposed to be square, because that was male energy. Then I had a garden next to that garden, and I can't remember, I think it was like maybe 13 spiral arms from the small square garden. I can't remember the measurements now, and I've lost my notebook, so I can't even look it up. But I had that, and then I had the giant garden that was round, major. Now it was the mother garden. They called it was a female energy garden, and it was the mother garden. So I had these 22 spiral arms spiraling out in this massive circle from the center, going into spirals, right? Just curved rows instead of straight rows the way that farmers do it. I did it according to the nature spirits. So I was out there for, up to 10 hours a day for weeks and weeks, planting and tilling and churning the soil and every single thing. And the more I watered it, the more hard the ground got and choked out the seeds, and they all died. But the nature spirits were happy. Also, in her book, she says to make sure you take 10% of your land and give it to the fairies and tell them this is your land, and you don't trespass on their land, and you just let them have it. and then they'll be happy. And so I did that. I had a mulch section, and then right next to the mulch section was their area. Once I told them that, a lot of wildflowers started to grow there. So that was very interesting. And they were very happy that I had the mulch pile. And after I had the mulch pile, Bigfoot started coming around. We had Sasquatch. We never saw them, but we felt them. And we saw a footprint once in the dirt that when the neighbors or neighbor kids like kicked the dirt over it and erased it like an idiot, I guess. I don't know. Like, hello, that was our evidence. Duh. And then sometimes I'd smell it. I'd smell the Sasquatch, and he'd be looking at me, and I'd feel it. He'd look at me through the window, and I'd be like, oh, give me the willies, because I knew something or someone was looking at me, and I smelled that. It wasn't a skunk smell, but it was like a skunk pit. Imagine if you didn't bathe for like a month and you were sweating every day, and then if your whole body's covered in fur, that was the smell that I smelled. And one day there was a massive boulder in my yard, and there's no way anyone could have moved it. And I have a Sasquatch episode. If you listen to that, it's all about that. But he or she, whatever, the Sasquatch people are very close to nature, and they're like nature spirits themselves, even though they can solidify. And I don't know a lot about them, but I do know that when I started doing this gardening project, suddenly they were more interested in me. Which was cool and also slightly terrifying, actually. But so I had done all this thing with the garden. I'd done everything with the garden, and I was proud of myself, and I was so excited. And then, it all died, and then I was just completely disgusted with it and discouraged. But I mean, by the time the potatoes were ready, then the ground was frozen, and oh well. I wasn't even going to try to turn over the potato. I was just disgusted with the whole thing. But it changed the energy of the entire yard and of the entire land. And I think that is what the nature spirits wanted. So sometimes, even if you do a failed gardening experiment, I think that sometimes the nature spirits will actually benefit from it, and it can benefit your land, it can benefit you. And I would sit on my deck overlooking my yard. The deck was on the second floor, and I would look and look and look. And one day my husband said, do you know anything about the golden mean ratio and phi ratios? I'm like, no. He's like, well, look in this book that we just bought. It was like it was by Melchizedek, Dranbalo Melchizedek, and it was the essence of the flower of life or something like that. And anyway, that book, there's like volume 1 and 2, and he was looking at it, and he started telling me about the golden ratio, the phi ratio, and he said that all of these things were built in Egypt. All these pyramids were built in Egypt, and they all have adhered to the golden mean and the phi ratios, and everything is mathematically correct, and we don't know if they were actually aware of it or not. And I'm like, that's weird. And then he said, you've been working with nature spirits, and I wonder if your garden is not also a phi ratio. And a phi ratio is, if you look at a seashell, like if you take the numbers, okay, 0 plus 0 is 0, 0 plus 1 is 1, 1 plus 1 is 2, 1 plus 2 is 3, or whatever, or 2 plus 3 is 5, so it kind of gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you add up all the numbers like that. And I even met a little boy who came up with this all on his own. He was 8 years old, and I watched him as the golden mean ratio and the phi ratios took place in his mind. And all the math came to him, and he just was a savant almost. And he's just like, whoa. And he wrote all the stuff out, and he says, look at this, Elena, what I discovered. And his mom's like, this is cool, cute, whatever. And he handed it to me, and I'm like, well, this is like the golden mean. How did you come up with this? He said, it just came to me, and I know it's going to be important to me in my life. So all of this is happening while I'm making the garden. I meet this little kid, and he comes up with this. And then my husband had this. I just started thinking more and more about it. One day I was looking at my garden, and I was looking at the square, small garden and the large, round garden, and I started to put a few things together, and I did the math on it. And what I built was 100% a phi ratio. It was like within the golden mean ratio. And the two gardens together were a phi ratio compared to each other, and which is the highest vibrational mathematical thing that you could ever do. But I didn't do it. I just listened to what they told me to do. And it blew my mind. Because there's no way in hell. I mean, you guys know I don't do math that much. I love math, but I don't, it's like I don't understand the higher phenomena of math. I didn't know to make this like that. I didn't go, let's set out to do a phi ratio. I'm like not that big of a nerd. Not in that way. I'm not a math nerd. I'm a nerd in other ways, but not that way. And it really started to freak me out. I showed it to my husband, and he saw it, and he's like, oh my God. And we did the math, and I broke the feet down to inches. I broke it down to centimeters. I broke it down to all the different ways that you can measure it. I walked across it with my feet. How many of my feet was it? My feet aren't a whole foot, right? And no matter how I did the math, it was 100% of the time, every single time, it was a perfect phi ratio. Going across, one way, going across the other way. The circle itself, measuring the diameter of the circle and the diameter of the square. And I mean, in every possible way I could do the math, from the center to the outside on the edge, from the center to the outside on the side, from the center to the outside of the big circle. I mean, I did all of the math again and again and again. And I mean, I had like several pages of my notebook filled with this. And every time it was like the golden mean. It was a phi ratio, which is what you find in nature, which is why all flowers have like either 3 leaves or 5 leaves or 7 leaves. It's like always in the odd numbers. And they're in the way that roses grow, and the way that conch shells grow, and the way that everything in the whole planet Earth grows. At least it's a law here. I don't know if it's a law everywhere else, but it might be. But the way that things are growing always grow in concordance with these ratios, right? These mathematically correct and perfect ratios. And so it dawned on me that it's possible that the ancient Egyptians were also using the means by which they were communicating with spirits of nature. They're working with the fairies, possibly. Maybe they don't call them that. Maybe they're calling them divine intelligences, like Michelle Small-Wright does. I don't think she's comfortable with the word fairy, the wee folk or the fays. Because I think for her it was a little bit of the connotations, and then maybe she sounded crazy, so she uses divine intelligence, but I don't know. I can't second guess her. But her stuff helped me to bridge the gap methodically and through kinesiology with nature. And it really helped me, and just to write everything down and to use a pendulum. And I used her book, and then I also used Letter to Robin. If you're interested in learning how to use a pendulum, Letter to Robin is excellent. I'm going to have to do a show on that at some point. But anyway, that's my experience in gardening in working with the nature intelligences and the nature spirits, fairies, fae, wee folk, the wee people, whatever you want to call it. Call them. I've had tree spirits call out to me and ask me for help. I've had tree spirits in my house angry at me, or angry at my husband, mostly angry at my husband. I've had hornets come and complain because my husband knocked down their nest accidentally. He knocked down a tree, and there was a nest that he didn't see. It was very well hidden. And as soon as he knocked it down, the hornets came and attacked him and stung him repeatedly. He had to run in the house. He was like freaking out. He had bites all over. I was like, oh my God. I mean, if it's poisonous, right, I'd take you to the hospital. I was like, no, I think I'll be fine. So we waited. We just played the waiting game for hours, and turned out he was fine. The next day, I went out to the deck, and one of the hornets came, and he started doing a dance in front of my heart chakra. And I connected with him because I was connecting with all animals and insects at that point, because I had done Amelia Kincaid's work. I had read one of her books and learned how, and basically he told me we didn't know what to do. We want to start a new nest, but he took our tree and, we need you to punish your husband for us. That man, you have to punish him for us. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do that. Don't worry. And so, but I told them where our land was and where our land wasn't. And I showed them a tree, and I had to imagine I was a hornet, and I had to go to that tree on the outside of the fence. I showed them where the fence was. Once I made them aware of what the fence is, why it's there, and who it belongs to, and what is happening with that, then they all went to the tree just on the outside of the fence and built their hornet nest up there. And they thanked me. They were so grateful. I'm like, we're never going to touch that tree. That will never have anything to do with us. That's on the other side of our land. And that way we can live in harmony. And they were really happy about that. So they left. And they lived in harmony with us by living on the other side of our land. So I've had a lot of experiences working with divine intelligences of different and varying degrees, whether it's insects or nature spirits that you can't really see. Although if they trust you, they will appear for a brief second. You'll see a bug that flies by. You'll notice that it's like a little teeny tiny human with wings. And then you do a double take and then it's back to being a bug again. That has happened to me many, many times, especially with dragonflies, because they're not always dragonflies. Sometimes they're wee spirits that will look like dragonflies. They can mimic themselves to look like that. And sometimes they'll reveal themselves and they will show themselves to you. If you go and meditate and sit very quietly and still and tell them that you want to work with them, you want to learn more about them, they will be willing to work with you as long as you show who you are to be a gentle, kind, caring, and loving person. Then they're like, okay, now we want to work with you. And I believe in my heart of hearts that back in the day, many generations ago, that people worked with nature spirits all the time. In Ireland, they have a love-hate relationship with nature spirits. And there's a lot of folk tales about how to keep the fairies out of your shoes and out of your house, and how to disrupt them if they're interfering with your life. You spill rice on the floor and they get so angry because they have to pick it up or count it, and they freak out. Demons also like to count rice. There's certain demons, if you put rice on the floor, it'll freak them out and they have to leave. or pieces of grain, and if it's willy-nilly, it just makes them so angry. But if you keep your house well swept, but you keep accidentally spilling sugar on your counter, that's how you attract the fairies. They will come, and I have a lot of fairies in my house. There's always a lot of spilled sugar, I guess. But my friend Cheryl, who works with fairies up in Nova Scotia, she told me this, that a lot of times the sugar will attract the fairies. And she's Scottish-Irish, another redhead like me. So she has that background too, I've got the Scottish, Irish, and Native American, and, mostly Irish, but, I've got that connection. It's in my blood, but a lot of us have that. We just don't know it, right? So once you start to realize that you can work with the nature spirits and you can work with the fairy folk and you can grow something amazing together, that's better. Another thing that people do, instead of what I did, painstakingly ask them, you could just do grow things according to naturalization, which it's like a weird thing that I heard about years ago, where you just take the seeds and you throw them up in the air, and where they land, you plant them. I don't know if that's really what the fairy folk have in mind, but you can ask them to help you if you want to do it that way. If you want to plant bulb flowers and you don't want to do it all in a pretty nice, neat little row, which is going to just make the fairies angry because it's not natural. It's not how it would grow. You could just ask them, hey, I'm going to throw these bulbs up in the air, and wherever they land, I'm going to plant them. So you guys have to direct them. And you close your eyes, throw them up, wear a hard hat because bulbs will hurt you if they hit you in the head. But a lot of people do that. They'll take something, they'll throw it up, and where it lands, that's where they're going to plant trees in their yard. And then that makes it a little bit more natural and a lot less rigid, I bet the French people pissed off the fairies a lot. When you look at the French gardens, they're also neatly manicured. Probably the English too pissed them off a lot because they're so neatly manicured and in rows and lines and perfect and it's symmetrical but it's not natural. And I wonder if that doesn't make them angry. Like they probably just said, forget it. We're just gonna let the humans do what the humans will do and leave, But if you work with the nature spirits, you're going to open up your world to a whole nother magical possibilities. It's a whole nother realm. And you'll start to find that sometimes if you're sad, you'll feel like teeny tiny hands might be soothing you. Or you'll hear laughter. When you're happy, you'll hear laughter. Sometimes you'll hear music that has no other explanation other than you hearing the music of the wee folk. I've heard music, I've heard laughter, I've seen they have trusted me to appear before my eyes in floating bubbles of light. I've seen them many times in the forest, just floating on by. And Native Americans have a legend that that's either nature spirits or the spirits of the dead travel in the ghost balls, the ghost lights, but it depends on the tribe you talk to. I think they were fairies because sometimes I've heard them laughing while I heard them chasing each other around my yard at night. And it's just like, if you watch the old-fashioned Bewitched, the old show Bewitched, where her mother will appear to her in her bedroom as a floating ball of light. Sometimes it's like purple and green, or sometimes it's just like a swirly white ball with like rainbow energy around it, which is like really imaginative for Bewitched. But I've actually seen things like that in nature. It's weird, but also really cool. And it was fantastic to see it. Like, oh man, they trust us enough to show it, to show themselves. And I saw it a couple times and I was like, did you see that, to my husband? And he'd be like, no, I didn't see anything. What are you talking about? And one time we were both standing in the living room and we got really quiet and we just kind of looked at each other, and then we looked outside at the same time and we saw it together. We saw one chasing another one, two balls of light. So when you work with the fairy folk, whether it's for gardening or other purposes, you can ask them to bless the land. You can put, things that they like. Tell them that you believe in them. I do believe in fairies. I do. Make them know how much you love and appreciate them, and they will come around more and more and more. Even if you live in an apartment, have a couple plants, put them outside if you have a balcony or a windowsill, and open up your house to energy of just the air coming in. Open your curtains for the sun coming in. Ask the nature spirits to come in. Get house plants that live on air. There's house plants you can put in your bathroom that just live on the steam from your shower. You don't even have to water them or take care of them, but ask the nature spirits to come and they will be there with you. It's all extremely fascinating. I love the world and the realm of the fairy. I love them so much. And since I started working with them, it's brought me a great deal of comfort to know that I'm never alone. It's a little freaky sometimes, but if you go out into like the forest or into a meadow, you're going to be surrounded by thousands of fairy folk. And if you know it, and you can feel them, and you tell them you love them, and you give them a little offering, like a few coins, like a couple pennies. They love shiny pennies. Or you give them, maybe you find a feather somewhere and you bring a feather to them and say, hey, this is for you guys. They're going to bless you. And I don't know in what ways exactly, but you're going to feel good and loved and surrounded by energy that you didn't even know existed before. So whether or not you want to be a gardener, that was my experience with gardening. Even though the garden itself didn't work, the energy of it did. So it increased the power of the house, brought a magical quality to it, and helped me to communicate with them, with the nature spirits, better. Anyway, that's all I got to say about that for tonight. I do want to hear your ghost stories for Metaphysical Ghost Speak. We have 28 days left before that comes out, so I need your ghost stories. We have a little bit over 3 weeks left, and that will be for our Halloween edition, and also for our Christmas Eve edition. I am going to do Santa Claus stories of Christmas miracles. Any kind of miracle, could be from Hanukkah or Diwali as well, or any other holidays that you celebrate around December time. But if you've ever seen Santa Claus, Père Noël, the fat man himself, I want to hear your Saint Nick stories, Saint Nicholas. I love this spirit. He has visited many, many, many times. I feel a love and a kindred spirit with him. And I'm going to tell you some really amazing stories about him coming up in December. But I want to hear if you guys have any information, any stories, any experiences, or paranormal, supernatural events that have happened surrounding Christmas specifically, because I think it's a time for miracles and it's a time for special Christmas related energies, happenings, experiences, and miracles. And I think it would be inspiring for everyone to hear your story. If you have one, please send it in. Please send me any and all supernatural stories surrounding ghosts for Halloween and for Christmas, Saint Nick. All right, that's all I got to say about that. For now, I love each and every one of you. Thank you for your love, your prayers. I'm grateful that we're on our ascension journey together. Thank you for listening to the show and telling all your Facebook groups and putting the occasional, high quality rating on iTunes, because that helps other people to find the show as well. Thank you for telling your Instagram people also, because some of you have been doing that, as well as sending it to your email lists. So metaphysicalsoulspeak@gmail.com, that's my email. Tell everyone to listen to Metaphysical Soul Speak, the podcast. And I wanted to thank you in advance for all of your love and support every day. I feel the love and I'm grateful for it. And I'm going to keep coming back. Tomorrow I'll be back with all unique and original programming, just like always. But that's all I got to say for now. Signing off with peace and joy and the high vibes of the holy fifth dimension. Till next time, guys. Peace. Do you ever wish you could look into the next chapter in your book of life and see what's coming next? What does the universe have in store for you? I can help you with that. I will give you a Celtic cross reading, which is 10 cards, or you can ask me 3 questions, and I use 3 cards per question. So that's 9 cards, or I can channel your higher guidance, or maybe God directly for you. Maybe you want to talk to your dear departed Aunt Edna, because maybe you have a few questions and she was the smartest person you knew. If your deceased relatives are available or your ascended masters, I can channel them for you personally. Let me have 1 hour to show you the future in your next chapter of your book of life. Readings are $75, and it takes me an hour to an hour and a half to complete. And for this price, you will also be hooked up to the healing grid around the planet for free, which means yours truly, me, I will be giving you Reiki 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the rest of your life. All you have to do is let me know. metaphysicalsoulspeak@gmail.com, and we will explore your future together.